June 1978, Buenos Aires. Argentina has just won its first World Cup. On home soil, in front of its own crowd. The country is delirious, flags everywhere, strangers hugging in the street. Less than 2 kilometers away, inside a naval building called ESMA, there are people who will never be seen again. Survivors would later say they could hear the stadium from where they were being held. The government running the country is a military junta, and this is the first time, but not the last, that Argentina learns something about itself. A nation's pain and a nation's football can become the exact same story.
This is Funky History, where history finds its rhythm. Let's rewind. 8 years after that World Cup, Argentina would do something with a football that people still argue about today. A handball so brazen it has its own name. The Hand of God. Everyone's seen the clip. Almost nobody's been told why it mattered. This is the story of a war Argentina lost, a World Cup it hosted before that, and one goal that became the place where both of those things came out at once. April 2nd, 1982. Argentina's military government invades the Falkland Islands, a small British territory in the South Atlantic that Argentina calls the Malvinas and has claimed for over a century. In Buenos Aires, 250,000 people pour into the Plaza de Mayo to celebrate. This is a junta that's been disappearing its own citizens for 6 years. One afternoon, people who hate the regime and people who love it are cheering the exact same flag. In London, it's the opposite. Shock. Parliament gets called into session on a Saturday. Hasn't happened since Suez 25 years earlier. Margaret Thatcher stands up and tells the House plainly, British sovereign territory has been invaded by a foreign power. 3 days later, a British fleet leaves Portsmouth. 127 ships, aircraft carriers, 9,000 miles to sail. Crowds line the docks to see them off. Most of the country assumes this will be over in weeks. It isn't. On May 2nd, a British submarine sinks the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano. 323 sailors die. More than 700 others spend up to a day adrift in freezing seas before rescue. Nearly half of every Argentine death in this war happens in that single sinking. 2 days later, an Argentine missile hits the British destroyer HMS Sheffield. 20 of her crew are killed. The ship sinks under a tow a week later. The first Royal Navy ship lost in combat since the Second World War. And back home, Argentines are being told they're winning. State media runs headlines like, "We are winning," while, on the ground, the war is going the other way. Losses go unreported, defeats just don't make it onto the air. By June, British troops are ashore and advancing on the capital Stanley. On June 14th, after 74 days of war, the Argentine garrison surrenders. 255 British service members are dead, around 649 Argentines. 3 days later, the general who ordered the invasion is out of a job. Within a year, the junta itself is gone. 4 years later, 11 Argentine men would walk onto a field in Mexico City to play the country that had just beaten them. June 22nd, 1986, World Cup quarterfinal, Estadio Azteca, Mexico City, Argentina versus England. Their first meeting of any kind since the war. This fixture had never just been about football either. England had already knocked Argentina out of the 1966 World Cup, a game so bitter that manager Alf Ramsey said afterward Argentina's best football would come against the right type of opposition, a team who come to play football and not act as animals. Now stack a real war on top of that. Officially, Argentina's own coaching staff tried to keep the two things apart. Manager Carlos Bilardo told his players plainly, "This is a football match, nothing more. Don't disrespect the Argentine dead buried on those islands by turning their deaths into a talking point for a game." Privately, nobody believed that for a second. Several players on that Argentine roster had been of exact draft age when the war broke out. Jorge Burruchaga has said he was of that draft class, playing for Independiente at the time, and reported to barracks each morning in case the army needed more men sent south. He was never deployed, but he wasn't untouched by it either. Maradona, the captain, reportedly wasn't interested in pretending. Argentine accounts describe him in the tunnel, right before kickoff, telling his teammates something like, "These are the people who killed our kids, our friends, our neighbors. We cannot lose." Nobody was firing a weapon that day, and Argentina had finally found somewhere to put 4 years of grief. Not with guns, this time with football boots and a ball. Minute 51, Maradona and Jorge Valdano combine. The ball loops towards the England goal. Goalkeeper Peter Shilton, 6 inches taller than Maradona, comes out to punch it clear. Maradona gets there first with his hand. The referee, Tunisian official Ali bin Nasser, is waiting for his linesman to flag it. The flag never comes. Goal stands. 4 minutes later, Maradona does something nobody argues about. He picks up the ball in his own half, and running almost the length of the field, he beats 5 England players and rounds the goalkeeper. Gary Lineker pulls one back for England in the 81st minute. Final score, Argentina 2, England 1. Here's what you'll hear repeated as fact, that England had men on that pitch who'd fought in the Falklands. It's not true. England sent professional soldiers to that war, not footballers under contract to English clubs. No one wearing an England shirt that day had fired a shot 4 years earlier. So if the players weren't soldiers, was the war really there on that pitch? Yes, just not as a fact any single player could point to. It was there as fuel. Maradona himself didn't call it revenge for the Falklands in 1986. The team's own public line at the time was that football had nothing to do with the war. It wasn't until his autobiography, published 14 years later, that he wrote it plainly, that it was their revenge, that it was, in his words, recovering a part of the Malvinas. That gap matters. It means the connection between the war and the goal isn't a quote someone said in the heat of the moment. It's something a whole country carried for years, and one man eventually put it into words. The fuel was real even when nobody was naming it out loud. And this wasn't even the first time. In 1978, the same country had already learned that a World Cup could carry a nation's whole emotional weight, for better and for something much darker. By 1986, Argentina didn't need anyone to explain what a World Cup could mean. They already knew. Diego Maradona punched a ball into a net, and 4 minutes later ran the length of a field to score maybe the greatest goal anyone's ever seen. Both moments happened in the same 6 minutes on the same day against the same team that had beaten Argentina in an actual war 4 years before. No soldier was on that field, no general called the play, but a nation that had buried its dead, surrendered its war, and, 8 years before that, learned to pour its pain into a stadium, was absolutely on that field. It's why, to this day, this match isn't remembered in Argentina as a controversial win. It's remembered as the day the score finally read something other than lost. This is Funky History. Stay funky.